And we should know by this time tomorrow whether Herman Cain plans to continue his bid for the Republican presidential nomination or drop out because of a Georgia woman's allegations of a long extramarital affair. Cain arrived home late this afternoon to talk face-to-face with his wife, Gloria, for the first time since the allegation was made 4 days ago. He also plans to meet with major supporters and contributors, that tomorrow, before a previously scheduled event at his new Georgia campaign headquarters. Earlier today in South Carolina, he said he would have an announcement about the future of his candidacy on Saturday.
There's God's plan. But you see, God doesn't tell you his plan for you until he believes you are ready for those parts of the plan. So I believe that I'm on this journey. I'm on this journey for a reason. And I don't look back. I don't look back.
Now, should Cain fight on? And if he drops, what would that mean to the always volatile GOP race? CNN contributors Eric Erickson and Roland Martin are with us tonight, as is Penny Nance. She's the president of the conservative organization Concerned Women for America. Let me ask you first, Penny, if you look at the polling, where Herman Cain has suffered the most is among Republican women.
Of course.
Is he a viable candidate still, or should he read that polling and read other signs and say time to go?
Well, it's not just with women he's in trouble, but certainly that was the first place he started to slip. Look, Concerned Women for America said from the very beginning, whether it's Bill Clinton, whether it's John Edwards, whether it's Herman Cain, character counts. And so we believe, and we pushed back very strong against what Lynn Wood said, which was that it's all about personal, what happens in the bedroom stays in the bedroom, and it's all about a person's personal life. We think once you become a candidate that it's public, you've entered public life, and it's worth a discussion. And conservative women want to know. We want to know what kind of man we're entrusting our country to, and also the future of our children, even their lives when it comes to the military. So we think we have a right to know, and it's a great concern.
You mentioned the Lynn Wood statement, so I want to read it before I bring Roland and Eric into the conversation. Here's what he said Monday night. This appears to be an accusation of private, alleged consensual conduct between adults, a subject matter which is not a proper subject of inquiry by the media or the public. No individual, whether a private citizen, a candidate for public office, or a public official, should be questioned about his or her private sexual life. Is that, Roland, can you draw that line once you're a candidate for high office, especially the presidency of the United States?
I'm sure Senator David Vitter thought that was the case. I'm sure Livingston thought that was the case when he was on his way to be Speaker of the House. And I'm sure Newt Gingrich thought the exact same thing when he had all of his issues several years ago. The reality is all of these questions are going to come out. What Herman Cain has to understand is that he admitted that he told one of his campaign aides when he ran for the U.S. Senate in Georgia several years ago. So to act like it wasn't going to come up when you're now running for the highest office in the land makes no sense whatsoever. Absolutely. Character matters because the American people want to trust the president. They want to trust that when you send troops into battle, that you're making the right call. And if they say that that if your own wife can't trust you, how can we trust you with the nation's treasure?
Eric, you know Herman Cain, and he is home tonight having a conversation with his wife. He also says he'll talk to some contributors and supporters. I want our viewers to hear him a little bit more of what he said earlier today in South Carolina, and I want your read on whether it is a candidate putting his best face forward or a candidate who really plans to fight on. Let's listen first.
I am reassessing because of all of this media firestorm stuff. Why? Because my wife and family comes first. I got to take that into consideration. I don't doubt the support that I have. Just look at the people that are here. We got to look at what happens to contributions, and we got to look at what we're going to reevaluate the whole strategy.
What's your gut tell you, Eric?
You know, my gut tells me that the campaign is over. I think the campaign is over, and the question now is, does he leave now with this implication hanging over him, and so people then presume that he's guilty of an affair? Forget the harassment allegations, just the affair, or does he try to save face and know the campaign is over, but drag it out a while longer so that he can leave after Iowa and say that, you know, it was because of Iowa, not because of the affair. My wife is with me. You've never seen Gloria Cain on the campaign trail for Herman. She's never been out there. She's a very private person. When I took Herman's job, a lot of people told me up front that she didn't really want him running for office. She was afraid of what would happen, and now she's being dragged into the meeting. He's going to have a very hard meeting with his wife, and if you're going to stay in the race, you don't announce on a Saturday morning in Atlanta. You go to Iowa.
Well, you mentioned Iowa. I just want to remind viewers, we showed these numbers earlier in the program. He's now at 8% in Iowa in the new Des Moines Register poll. He was at 31% a month ago. So I personally don't think it's just because of the character questions. I think that he couldn't answer Olivia's question. He's had some he was a candidate of great. But he also was proof early on that voters are looking for something different. They're hungry for not a traditional politician. And so he had great appeal. But if his decision is to let Iowa make the decision for him, I mean, those polling would tell you it's about to be made. How does it impact Gingrich and Romney?
Well, I think there's going to be, it may not just be those two that are impacted, by the way. There's Michelle Bachmann in the race. There's Rick Santorum in the race that conservatives like. We like both of them very much.
Well, I was in Iowa recently. You could sense some Santorum momentum. The question was, is it enough? Is it momentum to skyrocket him or momentum just to get him to a respectable place?
Both of those candidates don't necessarily need to finish first. They need to do well. And the question is, how well can they do? And those Kaine supporters have to go somewhere. I don't think they will go to Romney. They will either go to Gingrich or one of the others, in my opinion.
John, over the last 3 months, I've sat here and I said, look, we could spend all of our time looking at every single poll that comes out, who's doing well in Florida and South Carolina. And as we all know, none of that stuff matters really until December 1st, because we knew when we were 5 weeks out of the actual voting, all of a sudden you saw what was going to happen. And so what has happened? Through all of this whole process, where is Governor Rick Perry, where are the rest of the candidates, and you're seeing all of a sudden Newt Gingrich rises, Romney's still there, and so it's shaking out naturally. This is also why you have to have campaigns. This is why you get in the race and you speak to editorial boards, because this is a weeding out process. So it's no shock to me the numbers will change. Even if you take away the issue of a possible affair, and you will see his numbers drop, and you will see serious candidates, to be honest, all of a sudden rise.
And Eric, Penny says she's not sure Romney would benefit. We know there are questions, especially among evangelical voters, hardcore conservatives. They don't think Romney's one of them. If they pick up Parade magazine with their Sunday paper this week, and they're going to see this, my colleague David Gergen did an interview with Mitt Romney. He says Mormons are not permitted to smoke, drink alcohol, or coffee, or have premarital sex. Has it been hard to follow those rules? Governor Romney says, I think being faithful to one's spouse is a wonderful source of passion and devotion in marriage, and that paying tithes, as suggested by the Book of Mormon, makes one's money less important. There's clearly an effort by the Romney campaign, which is being careful in with whom and how often it does media interviews, that when they do things, this here is to try to make a more personal connection, which he has failed so far, right?
Yeah, very much so. They know, and just looking at the start of the show, the focus group, he does not have a personal connection with people. People respect him. They respect what he's done, but they're not sure about him. They're not sure he'll betray him. Remember, conservatives are still very bitter with George W. Bush for TARP and the General Motors bailout and immigration and Harriet Miers. They feel like he started betraying them in the second term, and now they see a guy who surrounded himself with a lot of Bush supporters in his campaign. They see a guy who was the conservative in 2008, the middle-of-the-road guy in 2012, they're not sure what to make of Mitt Romney. They respect him. They just don't trust him.
Eric, Roland, Penny, stand by. When we come back up next, the truth about Rick Perry's efforts to revive his campaign. First, it was Letterman, a late-night stop for Rick Perry after he froze in a debate and couldn't name 3 federal agencies he would put on the chopping block.
I thought the debate was tonight.
I see. Well, there you go. That happens to everybody.
And then last night, it was Leno to make light of messing up the voting age while campaigning in New Hampshire.
What happened in New Hampshire here? This is the most recent one.
Yeah.
Take a look here.
Those of you that will be 21 by November the 12th, I ask for your support and your vote. Those of you who won't be, just work hard.
Yeah, you and I, we grew up in that 21 voting age.
Right. So you're thinking.
I was thinking drinking age, maybe.
Drinking age. Okay. All right, that makes sense. But how about November?
You gotta have an excuse, right? So that's mine, and I'm sticking to it.
So give the governor credit. He has a sense of humor and isn't afraid to poke fun at himself. But here's tonight's truth. The Perry campaign is beyond struggling. And with the first votes a month away, it is lights out if he stumbles again and needs to pay a visit to Conan or Jimmy Fallon. Given the troubles of Herman Cain and the historical combustibility of Newt Gingrich, Governor Perry may yet get one last chance. But emphasis on may, and even more emphasis, if it comes, on last chance. Truth is, American voters prove time and time again they're a pretty forgiving bunch. But there are limits. This is a consequential election, not a late-night TV revival tour. Penny Nance, Roland Martin, Eric Erickson have their own thoughts on whether Governor Perry is past the point of no return. And Eric, I want to go to you first because you wrote on redstate.com, your blog the other day, I think Rick Perry may yet have a second coming if he is ready. I say that having asked many callers to my radio show who are Kaine supporters where they would go. Most say Newt, the others Perry. And if Newt implodes, they almost always say they'd go to Perry. Romney is rarely their choice. Possibly another act. His margin for error is what?
Oh, none. I mean, this is a campaign that, think about it, his campaign strategy is based on luck. His campaign strategy is based on Newt Gingrich doing something, not Rick Perry doing something. They need to be making their own luck. And frankly, John, I'm not yet convinced, and I don't know that I can be convinced, that if he does get a second look, his campaign team is going to be ready. One of the best assets he had going into this was his campaign team was homogenous, had just come through a 2010 campaign. They knew how to set it up. The worst thing his campaign has going for him right now is that they still think that this campaign can be played nationally like it's played in Texas.
As the Texan in the conversation, when you watch Governor Perry, and he has stumbled himself into a tough box, you think what?
Beyond a Texan, I'm also a Texas Aggie graduate, and I'm saying, Rick, take the Aggie ring off when you're screwing things up like that. Maybe it's an orange tie he's wearing, it's a Longhorn thing. No, but seriously, it is, the problem here is, this is what happens also when I believe you get in the race because so many other folks were pushing you and you got in so late. Remember, we talked about this with Wolf Blitzer, and I said, Wolf, this is like the NFL draft. You can be great. You can run a 4.2 40 on paper. You can be perfect. You can go #1 in the draft. When you put the pads on, it's a whole different ball game. He literally is turning into the Ryan Leaf and Jamarcus Russell of politics. That is great on paper, but one of the worst busts possible. And this is unbelievable for somebody to have this much experience to be the governor of Texas and then to run this bad of a campaign. He might be last man standing. Newt's kind of getting a little arrogant with his comments, I'm going to be the nominee, I'm the smartest guy. And so he might still be around, but he has to dominate every debate, every conversation between now and Iowa.
You have a grassroots network. Do you hear a lot of Perry back from them?
Yes, actually. In Texas alone, we have about 22,000 members. Texas is a big state for us, and I can tell you they love him. They have worked very closely with him. They think he is a great governor, and they think he's been very good for their state. So
do they recognize him on the presidential trail?
They
or do they
don't,
think what happened to our governor?
Because, no, I will say, we've had this discussion. I'm like, what happened? I had such great expectations, and they said, you're not really seeing the man that we know yet. We hope that he has time to recover, but let me just tell you, what you're seeing is not as good as he can do. He can be better. So I actually am very hopeful. I hope that he takes, gets another chance, takes a breath of fresh air and goes for it.
I remember a lot of people in Massachusetts saying that about Michael Dukakis. That was my first campaign. We're not seeing the governor we know. And at least he got the nomination, at least. And then we saw what happened to him. Newt Gingrich was mentioned by Roland a moment ago. He is up in the polls. And when you go up in the polls, you get the kick me sign on your back. Ron Paul says, I can't believe Newt Gingrich is our front runner. Listen.
Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac had to be bailed out, and we had to pay those debts that were run up. And here he was getting a lot of money from them, and it's not a conservative position, it's a bailout position. So he made money off the bailout. It's sort of ironic to think that the American people now are seriously considering, that he's supposed to come in and straighten things out. That sort of is bewildering to me.
Let's say everybody gets about 10 or 15 seconds. Eric Erickson, will Ron Paul's attacks get people to give Newt Gingrich a second or third look?
Yeah, I think they'll start questioning Newt Gingrich because of Paul's attacks. He may not be able to be the nominee himself, but he can keep Newt, who is the great American Sisyphus. He rolls his career up the top of the hill, and it comes tumbling back down almost every time.
That Ron Paul ad was devastating and just what I would expect from a Texan.
There you see, this Texan gets a compliment. This Texan gets Newt.
Newt stumbled a little today, actually, in the life issue. I hope that he cleans that up, but we have some concerns about some things he said today.
Well, it's a fascinating campaign. We've got 1 month till Iowa votes. That's from Tuesday. Eric, thanks for coming in. Roland and Penny as well. Fascinating weekend. We'll see you right back here next week. We're also heading out to Iowa for a full week. That's the week begins Monday, December 12th. If you go to CNN.com/iReport, there's a special request. If you live in Iowa, around Iowa, want to contribute to our coverage, take a peek. You'll like it. That's all for us tonight. You have a great weekend. I'll see you Monday. Aaron Burnett out front starts right now.